Right now, Bangladesh is an absolute titan in the apparel world. We're talking about a $50 billion industry here. They are the second largest exporter of apparel on the planet, sitting just behind China, and this sector alone accounts for over 84% of the nation's total export earnings. It is the engine of their economy. But as we barrel toward 2026, this titan is approaching a profound, frankly existential crossroads. So in this explainer, we are going to unpack a strategic SWOT analysis of Bangladesh's sustainable cotton yarn sector. We'll be diving deep into the industry data to understand exactly what is happening under the hood of the global fashion supply chain. To really hook into the core of the issue today, we have to start with a critical question. Can the industry survive what's known as the green premium paradox? You see, Bangladesh has built some of the most world-leading sustainable infrastructure out there, but that very infrastructure is currently under threat. It's a paradox that is literally squeezing the life out of local spinning mills, and it perfectly sets the stage for understanding the incredible tension between being green and actually being profitable in today's global market. Consider this massive figure: $8 billion. Let that sink in for a second. That is the estimated annual value of a circular textile economy that Bangladesh is currently just missing out on. It's an entirely untapped gold mine sitting right there on the factory floors. Properly harnessing this $8 billion opportunity could completely save the spinning sector, but ignoring it, well, that could break the industry as global sourcing dynamics rapidly shift. It all starts on the factory floor, right? But behind the sheer, massive scale of these spinning mills lies a really dangerous, hidden vulnerability. Most of these facilities were established on a highly leveraged financing structure. We're talking typically 80% bank loans and only 20% owner's equity. That is a wildly debt-heavy model. So as bank interest rates have surged recently, these mills are just getting crushed by monthly interest costs. They're being forced to raise their yarn prices just to keep the lights on. Okay, let's dive into the strengths and really unpack this green premium paradox. Let's start with the country's undeniable power in green manufacturing. Bangladesh boasts over 200 LEED-certified green garment factories. Actually, some recent sources note it's reached 284. This is the highest number of any garment-producing country in the world. So without a doubt, Bangladesh is a global sustainability leader. They've invested heavily, and I mean heavily, in energy efficiency, water conservation, and cutting carbon emissions. This isn't just a PR stunt. It's hard, tangible infrastructure that prepares them for those strict incoming EU regulations. But that brings us to this incredibly tense friction point between the global buyers and the local producers. Who actually pays for all this sustainability? It costs an absolute fortune to retrofit factories to meet these green standards. And remember that 80-20 debt-to-equity ratio we just talked about? Yeah, that makes capital investments incredibly risky. So here is the harsh reality. Global fashion brands increasingly demand green compliance. You have to be green to even stay on their approved vendor lists. But they essentially refuse to pay a premium price for the finished product. This is the green premium paradox in a nutshell. The local upstream spinners and manufacturers are forced to just swallow all of those high capital costs internally. And during periods of rising energy prices and high interest rates, these mills are left totally vulnerable to extreme margin squeezes. All right, moving on to the flip side, weaknesses, specifically raw material import dependency. This dependency causes a staggering operational contrast. Just look at how competitors operate compared to Bangladesh. Spinning mills in places like India, Vietnam, and China can rotate their capital 3 to 4 times a year. Why? Because they can source raw materials quickly and locally. Bangladesh, on the other hand, faces an agonizing 9-month wait just to recover capital investments. Because they don't grow their own cotton, they have to import it 4 to 6 months in advance. Their working capital is completely locked up, which exposes them to wild global price fluctuations and heavy currency risks. And the sheer scale of this dependency is massive. Look at the projections for the 2025 to 2026 period. Domestic demand is sitting at 8.35 million bales. But domestic production? A measly 153,000 bales. Heavy rainfall during critical seed sowing windows has kept domestic agriculture completely stagnant. So this lack of local cotton essentially forces an entire $50 billion industry to rely on long, slow, and super expensive ocean freight just to get the basic fiber it needs to start spinning. $1.5 billion. Think of that number as a ticking clock. It represents the estimated value of the massive pile of unsold yarn inventory that is currently trapped in Bangladesh.
Why is it trapped? Well, regional competitors, particularly India, are dumping underpriced yarn into the market. India has its own domestic cotton, plus their spinners get government export incentives of 5 to 7%. So they're selling yarn 20 to 25 cents cheaper per pound than Bangladeshi spinners can even afford to make it for. Local spinners simply cannot compete with those prices when they have so much cash tied up in imported raw materials.
Okay, let's pivot to some good news. Opportunities, Jhut, and the circular economy.
It is time to look at the hidden gold mines sitting right on the floors of these factories, where the transition to a circular economy really begins. We need to clearly define this local term, jute. It refers to the pre-consumer textile waste, think fabric offcuts, the scraps left over on the cutting room floor, generated by garment factories. We are talking about nearly 600,000 tons of this material produced annually in Bangladesh. That's a mountain of material. And this isn't garbage. It is a highly valuable, high-grade raw material that can be mechanically and chemically processed right back into recycled yarn.
Just look at the raw jute bales compared to the beautifully processed recycled material next to it. This physical waste represents that massive $8 billion economic gap we discussed earlier. As the European Union rolls out strict new sustainability mandates that demand recycled content in apparel by 2026, the ability to turn this raw waste into high-quality processed yarn is going to be the ultimate competitive advantage.
But the current system is, frankly, backwards. Less than 5% of this high-grade waste is actually recycled locally into apparel-grade yarn. 40% is downcycled into cheap stuffing, burned, or just sent to a landfill. And worst of all, over 55% is exported raw to countries like India and Pakistan. Those countries then process the waste into recycled yarn and sell it right back into Bangladesh's supply chain at significantly higher prices. Bangladesh is essentially paying a premium to buy back its own recycled garbage. It's crazy.
So, how do we fix this? Let's look at another huge opportunity: central bonded warehouses. How do we fix that brutal 9-month capital trap and stabilize the supply chain while this circular economy gets up to speed? Well, there is a massive strategic policy shift currently on the table. This quote from Will Bettendorf at Cotton Council International provides some great authoritative backing for what is essentially a fiber-free zone policy. Establishing central bonded warehouses would allow international cotton merchants to store raw fiber duty-free directly inside Bangladesh, ready for immediate purchase. The operational perks here are absolutely massive. First, it slashes raw material lead times from agonizing months to mere weeks, or even days. Second, it defers duty payments until the cotton is actually used, which massively helps cash flow. Third, it enables bulk buying discounts from global suppliers. And crucially, it allows for shared storage. That means small and medium-sized mills don't have to carry the heavy financial burden of managing massive private inventories. By optimizing working capital and cutting out the demurrage and long shipping times, this shared warehousing model fundamentally shifts the power dynamic back to the local producers. It finally gives Bangladeshi spinners the financial breathing room they desperately need to lower their production costs and actually compete with that underpriced imported yarn we saw earlier. Which brings us to our final hurdle, the 2026 strategic crossroads. We are now bringing this analysis to its urgent, really high-stakes conclusion. Between the EU's incoming digital product passports, the reality of the green premium paradox, and that massive $8 billion opportunity just sitting in textile waste, the industry can no longer rely purely on low-cost labor. The game has changed. Which leaves us with a stark, provocative ultimatum. Is the global fashion industry, the brands, the buyers, the policymakers, ready to structurally and financially support Bangladesh's circular transition, or will they just keep demanding compliance without investment and watch an $8 billion sustainable potential quite literally burn? It's a reality the global sourcing market has to confront right now. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on the 2026 outlook for Bangladesh's cotton yarn sector.